بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. لله تبارك وتعالى. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. إن شاء الله تبارك وتعالى, we're going to do some reading in the translation Reliance of the Traveler in Book T on page 79. Page 796, sorry. Which is the book A Pure Heart. Kitab Al-Qalb Al-Salim, the book, The Pure Heart. And this is indicated in the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, يوم لا ينفع مال ولا بنون إلا من أتى الله بقلب سليم, which means the day of judgment will be a day in which children, family, wealth will be of no benefit. Only the one who comes to Allah with a pure heart. So this section is going to tell us some sifat, some characteristics of a pure heart. And insha'Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, the scholars that are mentioned or quoted in this section were scholars who, along with teaching the various Islamic sciences, they also focused in their writings with developing the seeker on the path to Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, inside of that person developing a pure heart and how to do that. And we will start with Imam al-Nawawi in this brief session, and then maybe tomorrow we'll talk about Ibn Ata'illah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. So before we start with the first one, let's go to the biographical section and read about Sayyiduna Imam al-Nawawi, inshallah, which is on page 1086, X 285. If we can read there first, inshallah. So we'll know who Imam al-Nawawi is, who's famous, but let us read the biographical note related to him. So it's on page 1086. We'll start there just to read about Imam al-Nawawi, rahimahullah. Bismillah.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. Imam Nawawi, introduction, is Yahya ibn Sharaf ibn Muri ibn Hassan Abu Zakaria Muhyi ad-Din al-Nawawi, born in the village of Nawa on the Hauran plain of southern Syria in 631/1233 Common Era. He was the Imam of the later Shafi'i school, the scholar of his time in knowledge, piety, and abstinence.
Abstinence here is a zuhud. In other words, Imam al-Nawawi, rahimahullah ta'ala, was among those who refrained from the worldly pleasures in order to draw closer to Allah. So he was zahid, and that is one of his qualities, having a zuhud with a bunch of ibadah. And the early people of Tasawwuf, among the companions and the followers of us, they were called Zuhad. That was the name for the Sufis in those days. Zuhad, people who refrain from the dunya. In other words, they had the dunya in their hands, not in their hearts. And Imam al-Nawawi, rahimahullah ta'ala, was one of them.
A hadith master, Hafid, biographer, lexicologist, and Sufi. When he first came to Damascus in
Highlight that he mentioned, so Zahid, that Imam al-Nawawi was a Sufi. And the book that we're going to quote from is one of his books that he wrote about Tasawwuf and its people, called Bustan al-Arifin.
When he came to Damascus in 649 after the Hijrah, he memorized the text of Abu Ishaq Shirazi's At-Tanbih, the Notice, in 4.5 months. Then the first quarter of Shirazi's Al-Muhadhab, the rarefaction.
So in the Shafi'i school, these two books in the 5th century and thereafter, even up to the time of Imam al-Nawawi, were major books in the Shafi'i madhab. In other words, if one wanted to study the Shafi'i school prior to Imam al-Nawawi's time, which is the 7th century, the main books, among the main books, were At-Tanbih of Imam al-Shirazi, Abu Ishaq al-Shirazi, and Al-Muhadhab. So whoever learned Al-Muhadhab and At-Tanbih were like considered strong in the Shafi'i school, right? In fact, some of our teachers, they had this combination. We would learn a modern book in Shafi'i fiqh and At-Tanbih with it of Ash-Shirazi. So we would learn two books at the same time. And then they would explain the introduction of Al-Muhadhab and read that. So we would have, like, even today, we would have these books read as to get the real essence of the Shafi'i school. And At-Tanbih, it is one of the books that has the most commentaries ever written on it. That and Al-Wasit by Imam al-Ghazali.
After which he accompanied his father on Hajj, then visited Medina, and then returned to Damascus, where he assiduously devoted himself to mastering the Islamic sciences. He took Shafi'i law, hadith, tenets of faith, fundamentals of jurisprudence, Arabic, and other subjects from more than 22 scholars of the time, including Abu Ibrahim Ishaq al-Maghribi, Abdul Rahman ibn Qudama al-Maqdisi, and others. Maqdisi and others. At a period of his life in which, as Dhahabi notes, his dedication to learning night and day became proverbial, spending all of his time in either worship or gaining sacred knowledge. He took some 12 lessons a day, only dozed off in the night at moments when sleep overcame him, and drilled himself on the lessons he learned by heart while walking along the street.
And so, and you see this habit that 12 lessons in different sciences every day. And he would memorize those lessons while walking down the street. That's how those great scholars were. Give me 1 second. I'm back on. So he would walk down the street repeating his lessons. This was the habit. They said, in repeating is the benefit. So the scholar would repeat his lessons, repeat his lessons, repeat his lessons. Imam Abu Ishaq al-Shirazi, he was the author of At-Tanbih and Al-Muhaddab. He was the Sheikh of the Nizamiya in Baghdad before Imam al-Ghazali. He was the Sheikh of the Nizamiya in the Madrasatul Nizamiya in Baghdad before Imam al-Ghazali. He used to have steps in the Nizamiya where he would climb a step and repeat his lessons. As he's going up each step, he would repeat a case. Then go the next step, repeat the case again. The next step, next, all the way to the top and come back down for each case. That's how they kept the knowledge in their minds. So it is an encouragement when we see these pious people to realize we're not doing a lot. So, and to step it up, to have a little tashmir, a little diligence. Naam.
Fastidious in detail and deep in understanding of the subjects he thus mastered, he authored many great works in Shafi'i jurisprudence, hadith, history, and legal opinion, among the best known of which are his Minhaj al-Talibin, The Seeker's Road, which has become a main reference for the Shafi'i school.
So in the Shafi'i school, the book that after you go through the whole sequence of books from summarized books and all the way up, when you get to Minhaj, that is the level of fatwa. And then the books in the Shafi'i school after that are commentaries and marginal notes on the Minhaj. So it is like the top level of Shafi'i jurisprudence.
Riyadh al-Salihin, The Gardens of the Righteous, and Kitab,
which our teacher said, Riyadh al-Salihin is a book of tasawwuf clothed in the garment of hadith. Subhanallah. So it is a hadith book, but in reality, it's a Sufi book clothed in the garb of hadith, showing you that tasawwuf is the essence of the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if you study Riyadh al-Salihin, you'll see that the chapters, the way they're designed, are as similar as the ways of the books of tasawwuf, which was showing that Sufism and Quran and Sunnah is not separate. It's all one. And Sayyidina Imam al-Nawawi was one of the best examples of exemplifying that in his practice and in his writing.
And Kitab al-Adhkar, the book of remembrances of Allah and Hadith.
Which no one should be out to, the scholars said, bi'dar washtari al-adhkar. Sell your house and buy the adhkar. And our teachers would say that these certain books of an-Nawawi, no practicing Muslim should not have them in their house. Kitab al-Adhkar, Kitab al-Riyadh al-Salihin, and al-Arba'in al-Nawawiyya.
And his 18-volume Sharh Sahih Muslim, commentary on Muslim Sahih,
which no one who studies the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ with seriousness can do without that book. In other words, if you're talking about the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ and you're talking about authentic hadith, there is no getting past this Sharh of Sahih Muslim by Imam al-Nawawi. It is the standard.
He lived simply, and it is related that his entire wardrobe consisted of a turban and an ankle-length shirt or thobe with a single button at the collar.
Which shows you his zuhud, that he didn't have a bunch of luxuries. In fact, when we were studying and going to the place where Imam taught Dar al-Hadith al-Ashrafiyya in Damascus, and we would go to the room where Imam al-Nawawi was and the place where he would pray and have his solitude, they maintained that spirit. And the sheikh there, he would say that when we would be in the room talking, and he said that, Imam al-Nawawi used to be here. And when people would come to visit him, they couldn't distinguish him from the other students. In fact, they didn't even know he was the sheikh. That's how simple Imam al-Nawawi was, radiyallahu ta'ala. When they would come, they would say, who was Imam al-Nawawi? And then they would look and point, that's Imam al-Nawawi. And they would be astonished. Like the Prophet ﷺ, sometimes you couldn't distinguish him from his companions. And the great scholars that were from that, like Sheikh Badruddin al-Hassani, they had this same spirit and zuhud like Imam al-Nawawi, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu.
After a residence in Damascus of 27 years, he returned the books he had borrowed from charitable endowments, bade his friends farewell, visited the graves of his sheikhs who died, and departed, going first to Jerusalem and then to his native Nawa, where he became ill at his father's home and died at 44 years of age in 676 or 1277 Common Era. Young in years, but great in benefit to Islam and the Muslims.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go back to 796, inshallah.
T 1.0, intention, sincerity, and being true. Intention. T 1.1, Nawawi. Allah the Most High says, whoever leaves home to emigrate to Allah and His Messenger, but whom death overtakes, paying his recompense falls to Allah. Surah 4, Ayah 100, Surah An-Nisa. The Prophet ﷺ said, works are only according to intentions, and a man only receives what he intends. Whoever's emigration was to Allah and His Messenger has truly emigrated to Allah and His Messenger, and whoever's emigration was for worldly gain or to wed a woman, his is for that to which he emigrated. This is a hadith whose authenticity Bukhari and Muslim agree upon, and there is complete scholarly consensus on the greatness of its rank and majesty. It is one of the cornerstones, fundamental supports, and most important integrals of faith. Imam Shafi'i, Allah have mercy on him, said it enters into 70 chapters of jurisprudence. He also said it constitutes 1/3 of sacred knowledge.
And the intention is extremely important, and niyyah. And the intention is often better than the deed when the intention is pure. So the great Imam Ibn Rislan, he mentioned to correct your intention before the deed and have that intention at the beginning of the deed. If you can make it last throughout the deed, you'll get the complete reward for that deed in the hereafter. So maybe we're not able to do all we would like to do because of a weakness in us. But this line should give us encouragement. He said, فَصَحَّحِ النِّيَّةَ قَبْلَ الْعَمَلِ وَأْتِي بِهَا مَقْرُونَةٌ بِالْأَوَّلِ وَإِن تَدُمْ حَتَّى بَلَغْتَ الْآخِرَةَ خُسْتَ الثَّوَابَ كَامِلًا فِي الْآخِرَةِ. Right? Wake up every morning and say, I intend to obey Allah in every act of obedience and to refrain from every prohibition for the rest of my life. If you make that intention every day, by the tawfiq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will find your good deeds will increase and your bad deeds will decrease. And hopefully you would die with having no bad deeds. Make the good intention. In every deed, make the intention to draw close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to earn the reward of Allah, to get the acceptance of Allah, and to seek Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. Go ahead.
Sincerity, ikhlas, T 1.2. Allah Most High says, number 1, nor were they commanded save to worship Him, sincere to Him in their religion. This is from Surah 98, Ayah 5. Number 2, so worship Allah with sincerity.
So we are created for ibadah, but that ibadah must be with al-ikhlas, with sincerity. What is sincerity? Al-amalu bit-ta'ah lillahi wahdah. As Al-Habib Abdullah bin Hussein bin Tahir, he mentioned the definition of al-ikhlas. He said that it's al-amalu bit-ta'ah, to act in obedience lillahi ta'ala wahdah, to Allah alone, meaning all of your worship is solely for Allah, as if creation doesn't exist, right? And they said the route to success fi dunya wal akhirah, in this world and the hereafter, is by way of sincerity. So the route of success is by way of sincerity.
T 1.3, the master Abul Qasim Qushayri, Allah have mercy.
Abu Qasim al-Qushayri, rahimahullah, was the great Ash'ari Shafi'i Sufi master who wrote the most famous early treatise on at-tasawwuf called Ar-Risala. It's a Risala fi tasawwuf. It's a treatise in tasawwuf known as Al-Risala al-Qushayriya, the Qushayri treatise. It's all about tasawwuf and the people of tasawwuf from the time of the Salaf, and the stations and characteristics and aqidah and belief of the Sufis. That's Abu Qasim al-Qushayri. And here you know Imam al-Nawawi, who was a Sufi. If you notice, the people he's going to quote coming up are all Sufis. And he's quoting from the Risala of al-Qushayri, which is a Risala fit tasawwuf, in Sufism. So to show you that being a great hadith scholar and a great faqih, hafiz and faqih, he was also a Sufi. And there's your indication.
He said, sincerity is to make Allah one's sole aim in acts of obedience, meaning to intend by one's obedience to draw nearer to Allah the Most High and nothing else, whether hypocrisy before others, acquiring esteem in their eyes, love of their praise, or anything besides drawing nearer to Allah. One could say that sincerity is purifying the mind from paying attention to one's fellow creatures.
MashaAllah. So this is the route to sincerity, as Imam al-Qushayri mentioned, to single out Allahu Tabarak wa Ta'ala, al-Haq, meaning the reality. The reality is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? In your acts of obedience, meaning you direct your entire intention to the worship of Allah, because Allah is al-Haq. He's the reality. Everything other than Allah is false. One of the pre-Islamic poets, he said, everything other than Allah is false. Subhanallah. The reality is Allahu Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, because Allah is the one who everything is done for his sake. Subhanahu wa Ta'ala.
T 1.4, Abu Uthman, Allah have mercy on him, said, sincerity is to forget to regard men by continuously regarding their maker.
And here, if we think about this, it will help us in our practice daily. It's going to take work and struggle to actually get to that reality where we do what we do despite others, in terms of traveling the path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sincerely. We are not distracted by creation.
He also said the sincerity of ordinary people is that which is free of self-interest, while the sincerity of the elect is that which comes over them, not from them. Acts of worship appear in them from which they are at a remove, or neither observe nor consider.
Naam, go ahead.
T1.5, and this is from Nawawi. Abu Yazid, Allah the Most High be well pleased with him, said, for 12 years.
Abu Yazid al-Bistami was one of the great early Sufi masters. So I'm highlighting that because sometimes you see names and you don't know who they are. These were all Sufis that he's quoting. Great Sufi masters, right? So we live in a time today when, oh, they Sufis. So was Imam al-Nawawi. And so was all those great people who he used as examples to tell us what to do. They were all Sufis.
For 12 years I was the blacksmith of my soul. For 5, the mirror of my heart. For 1 year I observed what was between them, and lo, around my waist I found the girdle of unbelief, Zunar, in plain view. So I worked for 5 years at cutting it, seeking a way to dissever it, until at length this was revealed to me, and looking at mankind, I saw them as dead, and prayed a fourfold Allahu Akbar over them.
MashaAllah, Sayyidi Abu Yazid, MashaAllah.
Sufficient to show the subtlety of the hiddenness of ostentation is the difficulty with which this master recognized it, who had few equals in this path.
So here, what does he mean? Imam al-Nawawi said that he had few equals in this path. في هذا الطريق يعني طريق التصوف, meaning the path of tasawwuf. He had few equals in what tariq? The path of tasawwuf.
As for his remark, I saw them as dead, it is of the great worth and excellence, words that express this meaning being seldom met with outside those of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What it signifies is that when he underwent this spiritual struggle and his lower self became trained and his heart enlightened, when he had mastered the self, subdued it, taken full possession of it, and made it submit in everything, he looked at all the creatures and found them as if dead, without discoverable trait.
Here, before we continue, this is mujahada. This is the spiritual struggle. Like he said, when he jahada هذه المجاهدة, he struggled this type of struggling. He made effort. And we always repeat our favorite 2 words of Imam al-Haddad, jahid to shahid. Struggle and you will witness, which is in compliance with the Quran. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Those who struggle with us, certainly making a difficult struggle, we will guide them to our paths.
They could not harm or benefit, bestow or keep back, give life or death, join or separate, bring close or make far, save or damn, give sustenance or withhold it. They possess neither benefit nor harm to themselves, neither life nor death, nor resurrection. Now the dead are dealt with regarding these things as deceased. They are not feared, nor are hopes placed in them, nor does desire arise for what they have. We do not do anything for their sake, refrain from anything for their sake, or forego anything of obedience to Allah for their sake. Anymore.
So there is 2 aspects. We don't do anything when we're sincere for the sake of creation, nor do we leave off anything for the sake of creation. And that's a finery that we need to think about there. We don't leave off something for the sake, because we always think, don't do nothing for the sake of other than Allah. Don't leave off something for the sake of other than Allah. Like, I'm not going to do this because I don't want people to think I'm showing off. That in itself is showing off. Subhanallah. I'm not going to do it because I don't want nobody to think I'm showing off. That in itself is showing off. Rather, you don't perform or leave off for other than the sake of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. So when you have these feelings, then you should do it. So Shaitan is tricky. So watch both ends of his tricks. Now,
any more than we would to win the praise of the dead. They are not shown off in front of, their favor is not sought through flattery or compromise of principles, and they do not occupy one's attention. They are not held in contempt or disparaged, their defects are unmentioned, their shameful points unsought out, their mistakes uncriticized, though if penalties prescribed by sacred law are incurred, we enforce them.
and that's why the scholars mention, do not observe others, because you may be looking at their ponds of sin, and missing your oceans of major sins. And among those major sins is doing or leaving off for the sake of other than Allah. So while you're looking at the pond of the sins of others, you may forget the ocean of your major sins. Alayka bi anfusikum. Watch yourself, right? So our teachers would say, be easy on others and extremely difficult on yourself. Subhanallah. One of our teachers, he told us of his teacher. He said he was a pious person. And he didn't like go outside much. He didn't mix with people much, just students and older sheikh. He said one time in his session, he was sitting with his students. He said, if the sins had a smell, none of you would sit around me. If the sins had a smell, none of you would sit around me. Allahu Akbar. What sins? You don't go anywhere. You don't do anything. You just teach. He's talking about the inward state. These hidden sins of the heart that no one sees, but Allah is aware of everything. As the Prophet ﷺ said, verily Allah does not look at your forms and your bodies, rather he gazes at your hearts. Subhanallah. And that's what we should be careful of, inshallah. Now,
In short, they are as though non existent in everything we have mentioned, the decisions of Allah Most High holding sway over them. Whoever deals with them accordingly has attained to the good of this world and the next. May Allah Most Generous give us success in realizing it.
وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah, tabaraka wa ta'ala, we'll stop there for today. Let me remind you of our upcoming event that's going to be let me do this another way. The first weekend of the new year, the weekend of July 3rd to the 5th at Masjid Muhammad. Allahu Akbar. We'll be continuing and there's the link. We will be continuing our in-person retreats, and this one will be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It's entitled Aqidah, a Comparative Approach, which we are studying the creed of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, Al-Asha'ira wal Maturidiyya. And then, as we learn that creed and its foundations, we're clarifying and identifying the mistaken notions in creed that exist in our time, the proponents of that creed, the books of that creed, and explaining how it differs from the creed of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah and how to clarify the errors in those differences. So in this retreat, not only you're going to learn the creed of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, you'll also learn of those creeds that depart from Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah in our time, and how to clarify the misguidances that are contained in those creeds, so that not only you know the creed, you protect yourself from the bad creed, and you're able to educate people how to not fall into it. As it is mentioned, I learned evil not to commit it, but to protect myself from it, because the one who does not know evil is likely to fall into it. I learned evil not to commit it, but to protect myself from it. For the one who does not know evil is likely to fall into it. I'll repeat that one more time. I learned evil not to commit it, but to protect myself from it, because the one who does not know evil is likely to fall into it. So we thought about that, because oftentimes people learn the creed of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, but they don't know what opposes it. So therefore, when they hear its opposite, sometimes they don't pay attention to it in the first place, because it's not explained well and clear. So when they come with the opposite, they may be confused, or they may be doubtful, or they actually fall into bad beliefs. So it is important to explain both. Once one learns the foundation, now it says, here's the foundation. Now that you have the foundation, this is what you're going to face in the world. And here's how you navigate that. That's the objective, right? So for instance, one of the things that really troubles us a lot is we see people who say, I'm Ahl Sunnah, and then when they talk, they explain the creed in the way other than Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, and they don't even realize what they're doing. That's quite disturbing. I am Sunni, but when I explain, if I talk about the creed, I sound like other than a Sunni, and I'm explaining things in a way that is not Sunni, and I don't even realize it. It's not that I intend that, because I didn't learn well the foundational Sunni belief and understand it. When I'm confronted with its opposite, I'm not able to distinguish. And sometimes, as our teachers used to say, things are made known by their opposites. They're made clearer by their opposites. When you put two things together, it's easy to see the difference. When they're separated, you get confused. So when you put them together and say, this is the right thing, this is the wrong thing, and this is why, it's much easier to attach yourself, should I go this way, to the right thing. So this approach, we found it very beneficial when we were learning, because we live in a time now, and I think I want to, either today or tomorrow, if I get some time, I want to talk about something that I got away from, but I'm realizing it keep coming back around. And what is that? It is to distinguish clearly between al-Iman or al-Islam and al-Kufr. And when I say I got away from it, because in my early studies, it was a big focus. And then it became controversial. I think maybe because the way it was explained and the way it was implemented, maybe it have been a little bit excessive. But the point was extremely valid. And now we reach a point where people are mixing between al-kufr and al-Islam, and they don't know how to distinguish it. And they're actually deeming al-kufr, explicit kufr, as Islam, or doubting that. And this is something that requires some discussion and some understanding, because there is a such thing as apostasy. And we need to understand that. It exists, and it's abundant in our time in the name of Islam. It's not Islam. But people are falling into apostasy, not realizing it, and censoring anyone who questions the validity of such an approach. And it's becoming normal, especially through the academic, educated, liberal platform. It is a mess, especially in the activist crowd, activist movements. In these times, kufr is running wild in the name of social justice. And as Muslims, we got to be careful. And our scholars, not scholars really, but we call them scholars, are tiptoeing around serious, dangerous issues because they're afraid to be canceled. So we got to be careful with this stuff. We don't want to lose our Islam because we don't have guts. Seriously. It is important. And I hear the dialogue where, you know, these people, they don't study anything about Islam. Excuse me if I be even more explicit. You have people who are open sinners leading Muslim people and intimidating them with their blasphemous ideas. Let me be more explicit. You have a woman who's a major sinner. Several, I'll just say, not name. She's not covered. No covering on her hair. And she's saying, I don't have to do that. That in itself, after she learns the religious rulings, she believes that, gone. And those who accepts that, gone. It's not a light issue. I remember one time Sheikh Samir was asked this question, and he was telling the lady, you need to cover. And Sheikh Samir is very gentle in his approach. And he gave the ruling, he gave the verses, he mentioned some hadith, he gave the fiqh ruling, you know, and he was trying to leave it. But the woman kept pressing, I don't have to cover, I don't have to cover. And he got some jealousy for the religion. He said, listen, I never forget this. He said, listen, I'm trying to be gentle with you. I'm trying to guide you slowly. But you keep pushing. Since you keep pushing, I'm going to tell you, for real, if you really believe that, you are no longer Muslim. That is kufr. I've never heard him say that. He said, if you keep pushing this issue and you really believe that, after knowing the rule, after knowing, you are a disbeliever. And I was sitting there, I was right next to him. I was like, whoa. I've never heard him speak that harsh. He said, you cannot destroy our religion with your ideology. You cannot destroy our religion. No, we don't accept. And in these times, we have to have that spirit. You have to learn the religion first. What are the rules? What are the guidelines? What are the principles? And we can't cross those limits. That's why they're called hudud. Hudud Allah, the limits of Allah. Don't go past them. Not for yourself, not for no one's cause. We have rules. And those rules are the rules of the sacred law, and we don't break them for nobody. So we have to be, and like I said, I never heard him talk like that. Maybe on 2 occasions, I never heard him talk that. That was the only time I ever heard him talk that harsh. And it wasn't harsh. I mean, just, no, I don't care how you feel. That even the face, I was like, wow. And I never seen it. And another time I seen him, it was about prayer. I saw him go 2 cases, and I'm talking about in years. But that one with that woman with the covering and trying to do her modernist liberal movement, he was having none of it. And I learned something from that, especially someone who's usually in Sufi mode all the time. I saw him like, that's a fine line. No. So this issue of, in this time, we need to distinguish. And we have this concept, this fear. I don't want to rush to make takfir, and you shouldn't. But when things are explicit, necessarily known to be among the religion, by consensus, have reached us by tawatur, these things are not negotiable. And sometimes in these conversations, in these rallies, in these movements, they cross the limits. And because of ignorance of the religious rules, we don't realize someone done stepped over the line. And it's not about mudahana at that point, no compromising at that point. We got to stop them. And ourselves if we're going over that line. But we need to know the limits. We need to know the limits. And I was telling some students, I was like, listen, I got y'all want to be, a little activist, and I got it. And it should be applauded that you have, I want to stop genocide. And good, do it. Don't commit kufr while you're doing it, please. And how could you do that? Not learning your religion. And you think activism is more important than learning your deen. And that activism without learning your deen leads you to kufr. This is dangerous. And the one who's pushing you to activism doesn't care about the rules of the religion at all, not a little bit. In fact, they'll say kufr statements like, what religion got to do with this? Religion has no place here. A'udhu billah. They say that. Religion has no place. A'udhu billah. Religion has everything to do with everything in our life. Every single aspect of our life has a religious judgment. What do you mean religion has nothing to do with it? So if we're not going to use the scale of the religion, what we're going to do? We're going to use your opinion, your desire, your passion. That's what we're going to judge by? When Allah said, have you not seen those who took their desires and passion as a God other than Allah? In everything we do, there's a religious rule, and we follow that rule. And if we fail to follow that rule, we say we are deficient. We don't challenge the rule. I am deficient. This is what Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam conveyed to us in the religious judgments, and we are muqassir. We are falling short. We don't change the rule. No, the rule is the rule, and we need to get ourselves up to following the rule. We don't change it. Sorry. No, I'm not. It's important. I'm not sorry. We need rijal who are not afraid to stand for the religion. No one's perfect. But this aspect of manipulating us with emotion and desire and politics and make us flee from religious rulings should never work for a believer, ever. There's rules, and we have to follow them, and we have to learn them. As Imam al-Bukhari said, al-ilmu qabla al-qawli wal-amal. We must learn the knowledge and the rules in the religion before any statement or action. You don't change the rules. So stop following people who didn't learn the rules, who don't practice the rules. There is in the rules how to go about it. We do stand against evil. We do stand against oppression. According to the rules of the religion, we don't make our own stuff. According to the rules of the sacred law, that's what we stand by. And if we don't know them, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge if you don't know. Don't go do your own thing. And Allah knows best. So we have to learn. Please, 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 please. We have to learn. Stop following ideas of kufr to remove kufr. Stop following the ideas of kufr to remove kufr. It doesn't work. You can't put out fire with fire. It doesn't work. Our sacred law is the similitude of that pure water that puts out the fire. You can't remove najasa with najas thing. You cannot remove a najasa with a najis thing. So they want to stop oppression with kufr, which is the worst form of oppression. And we wonder why. And we wonder why. Why we like this? Subhanallah. You ever look into your religious practices and your religious beliefs and convictions? How you wage war against the sacred law of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and you wondering why? Have you ever took a look at that? You wage war on the sacred law, on the awliya of Allah, those sheikhs and those scholars, and you wonder what's happening. Maybe you need to look into your deen. So may Allah help us to learn the religion. Let's learn the rules of the Sharia. Let's learn books of al-fiqh. Let's learn the judgments and then answer our own questions, inshallah. And don't act until we start learning. Just say, I'll make dua and I'll get involved when I know the rule of my engagement. Take some time to learn the rules. Don't just microwave it all the way through. Sit down with a learned teacher and go over a book of fiqh. And then after you do that, start asking about all these other things, right? Because once you do that, your questions will be answered within your learning. And you'll learn how to navigate. As one wise man said, it don't have to be you. Someone who learned, let them go do that. You make dua and support them when they're doing right. Let the learned people do that if that's what's necessary. And when you learn, then you go help. Tayyib, barakallahu bikum. May Allah reward you. May Allah increase you. May Allah make you a winner fi dunya wal akhirah. Bijah Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.